Have you ever gotten into a franchise or series of some sort and have just gotten immersed in about everything that it had to offer? Whether it was the dope characters, the setting, or the story. This was my experience with JoJo's Bizarre, the Yakuza series. Yakuza is just one of those series that's exploded in the past couple of years due to the extremely absurd moments and memes. And it's an amazing series of games that tell very deep and thought-provoking crime stories from one of my favorite fictional places, Kamurocho. Kamurocho is a fictional district in Japan modeled after Kabukicho, a popular red light district known for its entertainment attractions and lots of Yakuza activity. In the creation of Yakuza, the director Nagoshi mentioned how he would always go out clubbing, getting drunk, and visiting cabaret clubs to fully immerse him in the adult-oriented nightlife. He wanted to really capture the gritty and busy lifestyle that people were living in this time. From things like the thousands of advertisements and shops to the many adult cabaret clubs, Nagoshi really did an amazing job capturing the atmosphere and bringing that to Kamurocho. Having a setting be based on a real place with lots of businesses and products really helps the environment feel extremely genuine and real, which really helped with its first entry in 2005. While the game actually sold pretty well in Japan, it never really took off here in the West. They tried to market it towards Westerners with an English dub, and in my opinion, I think it's actually one of the funniest dubs to ever grace a video game.
Bring that shit, Kazuma! What's your fucking deal, old bastard?
Get out of here, Takashi. I did feel the urge to hit some balls today. Suppose yours will have to be.
While it wasn't horrible, it was just really weird and it definitely didn't work out as expected. From there, the series went on as something that was only really appreciated in Japan. It was actually so unknown that when Yakuza 5 released in Japan in 2012, it actually didn't release here in the West until 2015. But thankfully, with the success of the series in recent years, they've been able to push out newer titles with worldwide releases. And it could not be a better time to be a Yakuza fan, as the series is approaching its 8th main installment with a remake of a spin-off. It's also one of Sega's best-selling IPs ever. But what exactly makes this giant series so popular and loved? And why does Kiryu look like that in the 8th game? Now, the combat of Yakuza seems to be a mixed bag with people. A lot of people consider Yakuza 0 and Yakuza 1 combat to be the peak of the series because of something called style switching. Then there's a lot of people who think that the other games' combat are better, specifically Yakuza 5, which I can definitely understand. But in my perfectly unbiased opinion, I'd honestly have to agree with the first option. But first, before I go into the depths of combat, I'll inform you on heat actions first. Heat actions are something that tie every combat system together from every single Yakuza game. And for some, they're definitely where the combat shines the most. They're essentially special attacks that you can have during combat that do a brutal amount of damage to your enemies. The only thing is they use something called your heat gauge. Your heat gauge is something that will gradually increase as you fight and has to be full in order for you to use a heat move on your enemy. But if you aren't one to pay attention to your heat level, then you would probably notice that your character's aura would start glowing as they fight, which would also allow you to do more damage. Heat actions can also do more damage depending on which ones you have purchased and on what scenario you're in. And there is a heat action for just about every scenario, ranging from slamming your enemy's head into a car, stomping on them, ending their family bloodline, playing Skate 3, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, group heat actions, and performing WWE moves with your best bro. As you can probably tell, they aren't at all afraid to get absurd in any of their heat actions. Kiryu will literally pour boiling hot water on his enemies. Heat actions are definitely a feature solidified in the series, with it being integrated in just about every single Yakuza game. It has a very unique yet distinguished look. Although I think most of the insane and really funny heat actions come from Yakuza 0, 1, and 2, as I feel like they literally had no chill when creating some of these. As for the actual gameplay itself, it's also pretty great. All of these games make improvements over one another with every given title, but the two games that I definitely enjoyed the most gameplay-wise was definitely Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami 1. Yakuza 0 and Kiwami 1's gameplay is genuinely so much fun given the fact that you have 4 total combat systems to mess around with. They introduce different styles of fighting that you have access to at any given moment. This is called style switching. Style switching is an amazingly unique and complex system in its own right, as you have the ability to switch your fighting style style whenever you want on the fly. Using one style and one style only is completely viable, but it's recommended to use more than one style, as mixing them is definitely the way to go. I really recommend trying to not play these games like how I played them. After using Rush Style once I unlocked it, I ended up only using Rush Style like in a PC. Rush Style is great for mobility and fast punches, and that's perfect for a large crowd. Or if you master it, you can actually break the game and end up stun locking bosses. Or if you were to purely use Rush Style strategically, you can always switch to it and move around your enemy and then switch to another style. Honestly, a pretty solid way of fighting, and it's actually one of my favorite styles that you can use. The next style that you unlock is called the Beast style. With this style, you hit really hard and move slow, but you can really just decimate the enemies in your way. This style is pretty hilarious in my opinion because Kiryu is just genuinely a menace with this on. And I feel like this style is actually pretty underappreciated despite how broken you can get with it if you max it out. Then after that, there's your default style called the Brawler style, which kind of acts as the jack of all trades. It's a very balanced style, and honestly, if you're not a bot like me, you'll probably end up using this one the most. And since it's the first fighting style you unlock, you'll also probably end up upgrading this quite a bit throughout your playthrough. If you're looking for a style with a little bit of everything, this one's really good. And the final style, being the Dragon of Dojima, is more of an homage to the other Yakuza games. With this style, you have the original movesets of Kiryu from the first two Yakuza games, and Yakuza's 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's pretty nice to see it here with its cool glowing white aura and insane heat moves. Other than it being a nice little addition to give respect to the other games, there isn't anything too crazy about it. I'd say it's actually pretty similar to the Brawler style. But there is one little move that this style has that I forgot to mention, and it also may hold the most broken move in all of Yakuza. Yep, Tiger Drop is completely fair and balanced. Other than that, the Dragon of Dojima mode isn't even something you can get normally. You actually have to finish Kiryu's business side minigame where he becomes a rich Sigma male. But that's only in Yakuza 0. In Kiwami, you unlock this style by fighting Majima over and over again and leveling up the skill tree. In every Yakuza game, you'll have a little system where you can buy new moves and features to use in battle. This is really where the fun lies because you can of course get all of your iconic moves here. As for the gameplay of Yakuza Kiwami 2 and the rest of the games, they're all more or less the same with some gameplay differences. One major change if you were to be playing this in order is, well, no more style switching. Basically, you're kinda just now limited to only one fighting style, and it's the Dragon of Dojima style you unlock in Yakuza 0 and Kiwami 1. But it's really not all that bad, as there's still a lot of fun to play. It's just not so technical and advanced like the other two. Yakuza 4 even brings some added flair by having multiple playable characters. 4 to be exact. Each with completely different fighting styles and stances, and the story being centered around them. Also, please listen to Material Delights from this game, it's actually just too damn good. Yakuza 5 also continues this by having playable characters other than Kiryu. But with all the games and their different combat systems, I have to admit that I think I enjoyed Kiwami 2's gameplay way more than the other titles. Kiwami 2 is again a remake of the second PS2 Yakuza game, hence the Kiwami title. But unlike the first Kiwami remake, this game was created without style switching for whatever reason. It was definitely capable of style switching given there's a mod for it and it runs perfectly. I definitely recommend this mod if you find yourself wanting more out of the combat. Though even through the limitations of no style switching, I still love Kiwami 2's combat to death. And the reason for this is definitely because of the engine it was built on. The Dragon engine is hands down one of my favorite engines ever created because of the sheer amount of tomfoolery that you can experience here is just actually unmatched. This is not only one of the best looking engines I've ever seen, but it's also home to some of the goofiest fights in Yakuza. This turns almost every random street fight into the most explosive, outlandish brawl ever. Kiryu is kicking guys down the street, smashing them into stores, and the bodies are just ragdolling all over the place. There's a lot of personality with every fight, and it really brings the energy up with every encounter. There's just something extremely funny to me about big, buff, burly Yakuza men who hit so hard you can hear an echo when their fists land on your body to fighting like this on the street. Outlaw's Lullaby Lullaby was actually the perfect song chosen for these street fights because it perfectly encapsulates the goofy energy of them. It's upbeat, chaotic, and just downright funny to watch it play out. The engine that this game was built on also makes this game hilariously buggy. Other than the engine, the gameplay is as you'd expect with only one fighting style. Though there are a lot of upgrades, and if you can get even a little involved in the beginning, you might really like what you have here. There's a surprising amount of depth here, and I couldn't be happier that Yakuza 6 was also built on this engine. And props to Yakuza 2 for having Kiryu say the most iconic line ever.
Huh?
Oh.
やるよ。もう返せなんて言わねえ。そうか。よく味わって据えよ、兄弟。
As good as it is to play any of these games, except Yakuza 3, the real deal of any of these amazing games are the stories that they tell. Besides the fun gameplay, the Yakuza games are home to some of the most wild crime dramas that you'll ever have the chance of experiencing. You start off this journey in Yakuza 0 with a man known as Kiryu Kazuma, who is a new and low-ranking member of the Dojima family. The Dojima family is a subsidiary of a massive Yakuza organization known as the Tojo clan. Kiryu is a pretty stoic guy who does what he's told and works alone for the most part. He doesn't really have much other friends other than one other person, a man known as Nishikiyama. Nishiki is an old friend of Kiryu from when they were just little kids. They grew up together and now have started living the Yakuza life together. Unlike Kiryu, Nishiki is a more carefree and relaxed person. He just wants to have a good time and enjoy the glamour of the Yakuza lifestyle. The story starts off with Kiryu assaulting a man in a parking lot. He was tasked to do this after the request of a loan shark that he was acquainted with. After finishing the job, he then leaves and meets up with Nishiki. And this is where you get to know one of my favorite characters in the franchise. In the first 30 minutes of Yakuza 0, you and Nishiki walk to the bar and have a nice conversation. It's a very normal conversation where Nishiki talks to you about using the money that you have for nicer things in life, like bar hopping and fancy expensive clothing. And right off the bat, you see how well of a dynamic these two have with each other. You get to see how Nishiki wants to enjoy the finer things in life, while Kiryu is a very nonchalant person when it comes to these kind of things. And I think that this is a perfect start for a game like Yakuza 0. It lets you get a nice feel for the life that these two live and the kind of mindset that they have. After talking for a bit, Kiryu and Nishiki arrive to a bar where they enjoy some drinks and some very casual karaoke. But soon after, the news turns on and the two hear about a case of a man who was just murdered in the back end of a parking lot, with a bullet wound right through his forehead. This kinda scares the two, as they know Kiryu didn't actually kill the man, he just roughed him up. After being called in by your superiors the next day, you can tell there's a lot on Kiryu's mind and a lot of uncertainty into where this might lead him. Which makes perfect sense, as this is starting to look like a really bad setup. So after getting some rest, Kiryu wakes up the next day, and I decided to do exactly what Kiryu would do if I was in his position.
さて、一丁決めてくるか。
Yeah, so here's basically where you unlock the free roam for your first time. And my god, I'm not joking when I say this is one of the best games in the series for side quests. The amount of stuff that you can do in Kamurocho here is just alarming. And you can easily sink about 100 hours into Yakuza 0 by just its minigames alone. This works as a great break from the insane tension and action that you'll be experiencing in the main story. And for some people, I swear their main focus when it comes to the Yakuza games is literally just the side activities. But the side stories do a great job at fleshing out Kamurocho and the people within it. It goes back to what I was saying before, with the setting feeling extremely authentic and lived in. Kamurocho may be a magnet for Yakuza and crime, but it's also home to a lot of interesting and charismatic people. Some of these side quests you'll find in any of these games could lead you to experiencing a really nice and wholesome story where you help someone through their insecurities, or just have Kiryu become a Riz God. The large appeal for me is just how significant they contrast the situations of the main story. There could be a lot of some really heavy stuff going on in the main story, and you can just flat out about ignore it and go play mini pocket racing or some shit, which can basically be its own game mode with how fleshed out and detailed it is. And honestly, every minigame or side content has an insane amount of polish or depth tied to it, even if it's something as small as 8-ball or like karaoke. In Yakuza 6, if you go down by the pier in Onomichi, you can actually run into a fishing girl which will unlock a little side story of her family business. And if you were to continue her story, you would actually end up unlocking an entirely new fishing minigame that is, in my opinion, peak Yakuza fishing. It's super fun to actually play through, and there's even a boss fight with a squid that has its own theme, and it's insane. And this is something that could have been skipped entirely if you just chose to not talk to the girl by the pier. And it's great because I feel like the fishing mode in Yakuza 6 was something that we needed, since fishing has always been a popular side mode in the Yakuza series. There's a fishing mode in most of the games, but nothing will ever rival the tension of catching the goddamn tuna in Yakuza 3. This is exactly what makes Yakuza setting one of the most exciting settings to experience, and it's not even that big of a map, with the beauty of it all just being how random it is. You really never know what to expect with any of these games. One second you could be dancing with Michael Jackson himself, and the next you could be trying to defend yourself from a Yakuza crime boss in the sewers. One of my personal favorite side stories actually came from Yakuza Kiwami 1, where I was on my way to the next mission to progress the story until I was stopped by a girl being harassed by a drunk man. After scaring him away, she then asks you if you'd like to have some drinks with her. And with how much experience Kiryu has, we then say yes and start walking towards a bar. As she brings you to her usual bar spot, things seem to be going well. She starts talking about how comfortable she feels around you and starts aggressively flirting, and Kiryu kinda just takes this like the absolute Chad he is and says literally nothing to her. After a bit of small talk, she then asks you what you think of her, and to keep it going, I just responded with the top option. Now, after all that, she'll ask you to toast and drink up, but this part is very important. If you look closely to the drinks, you'll notice that the only drink that seems normal is her drink, while Kiryu's drink is fizzing a little bit. I was actually completely unaware of this and didn't notice it at all when I chose the first option. So when Kiryu proceeded to drink with her, he then passed right out on the desk, and he coincidentally wakes up by the drunk man that he scared away earlier. He explains to us that the whole situation was a setup and that we just got conned like he did. So I decided to do what anyone else would have done, and I reloaded my save. This time I reject any offer to drink with her. The first time I rejected, the bartender kinda nudges me into it a bit, saying things like don't let her down. After rejecting her offer again, the bartender gets a bit more aggressive and flat out tells us to drink. At that point, Kiryu gets a bit fed up and points out the pills at the bottom of the drink. And from there, the bartender gets pretty upset that you figured out his scam, and he summons his backup Yakuza boys. And just like that, he went from having a really nice time with a girl to fighting 3 Yakuza men and a buff bartender. After teaching them a nice little lesson, they start to beg for forgiveness. And to compensate, they give you 100,000 yen and a passcode to a secret casino in the basement of a ramen shop, which will just lead you to even more insane situations. But it's the moments like these that do a good job of catching you off guard, and it brings such a charming element of surprise. These bizarre situations are just everywhere in these games, and I know they had too much fun making some of these. And while a lot of these are once again used as a great way to take a break from the story and do something else, they're also good for developing and humanizing our main character, Kiryu Kazuma. Being the stoic, serious, and noble person that he is, seeing him jump into these crazy situations is just always so much fun. But outside of the goofy Kamurocho situations, Kiryu's life has been nothing but hardships. And it's been something that he's had to deal with since the day he turned Yakuza.
俺にも隠された過去があったんだ。
隠された過去？
ああ。だが俺はそれを知ってしまったことで苦しかった。知らない方が良かったとさえ思った。もしかしたら人間には知らなくてもいい過去があるんじゃないのか。
それは自分の過去を知っている人間のセリフよ。
Being known as the Dragon of Dojima, he would get this title in Yakuza 1, and of course he would get massive respect and is even seen as a living legend in the later games for his amazing achievements. It's even kind of a meme at this point at just how many times Kiryu has returned and saved the Tojo clan from collapsing. And time again, you would see Kiryu go through unimaginable pain, conquer men with status and power, and lose the people that he loves the most in the process. Naturally, you would expect him to be on the same kind of energy as the usual Yakuza in these games. Slimy, arrogant, and disgraceful men who would do anything to get to the top and take over these giant factions to rule Kamurocho. But coincidentally, Kiryu is actually nothing like that, not even in the slightest. He's naturally a good person with morals and values tied to everything that he does. He would never attack someone unprovoked and would even help someone who has done nothing but harm him in the past as long as they've changed as a person. Even in game, you can't really mess around or cause mayhem in the city, as Kiryu would never do that. Basically, you just can't play this like a GTA game. It's also true that Kiryu has never canonically killed anyone, which is something that I question every day. In Yakuza 3, he even starts his own orphanage to take care of needy kids without any parents. You kinda notice pretty early on that he's always been a man who suffered many tragedies and grew up with no parents to take care of him. So seeing him give back in the best way possible is just so heartwarming and wholesome. Being surrounded by the Yakuza life for as long as he can remember, he was bound to end up living the life that he lives now regardless. But his code of honor that he holds so tightly just makes him stand out from everyone else around him. And in every game that he's in, he's never involving himself in anything malicious unless he absolutely has to. And it's not just him, but the people that he meets during these games also have their own idea of what it means to be a Yakuza. You see people like Nishikiyama, Seijima, and even people as minor as Rikiya change throughout the stories. Everyone has a different definition of Yakuza and what it means to live this dangerous life. And this goes back to what I said earlier with one of the first interactions with Nishiki, and how he views his life compared to Kiryu. As you start to get more interactions with the other amazing characters, you start noticing that everyone sees this differently, which is exactly what will lead to conflict after conflict. And for a quick moment, I want to highlight a character called Goro Majima. Majima is one of, if not the most popular character of the Yakuza franchise for his extremely bizarre and downright eccentric interactions. He's definitely the Yakuza character to steal the spotlight anytime he's on screen just for how he acts and speaks. He has a title known as the Mad Dog of Shimano for his deranged style of fighting and general attitude. He acts as this sort of psychotic mastermind who's always one step ahead of you, but also has some of the funniest scenes in the entire series. I guess the best way to describe him is a wild card for the series. And in Yakuza 0, you can not only play as Kiryu, but also Majima, and it brings this really fun and engaging dynamic that the series hasn't really seen before besides Yakuza 4 and 5. But the thing about Yakuza 0 is that Majima is not the Mad Dog of Shimano. He's just another Yakuza trying to get by. Just like for Kiryu, Yakuza 0 would tell the origin story of Majima, and it would show just how much he went through, which would eventually drive him to his breaking point to becoming the Mad Dog of Shimano in the future games. Majima is essentially atoning for something that happened many years ago with his family that has led to him being exiled from the clan and tortured for a year straight, which would eventually lead to him losing his left eye, where he would then cover it up with his iconic eye patch. But even through his expulsion, he still has it in his heart to join back and make something of himself within the clan. I can really only assume that he went through all that because he didn't want to give up his dream of the Yakuza life, and also probably wanted to join back for his best friend, which you would learn about later on. But if Majima were to join back, it also has its extreme terms and conditions. In order to join back the Tojo clan, Majima is tasked with running a cabaret club in Sotenburi called the Grand, and basically has to make it the most successful cabaret club that it could possibly be. So he's essentially buying his way back into the business, and has to constantly be pulling in money for his bosses. Along with these terms and conditions, he is completely stripped from his freedom and has to follow any order no matter what it is. He's not able to run away or stray too far as he's being watched at every given moment. He's not allowed to have any opinion on his situation, and any source of insubordination could lead to it being fatal. And his boss Sagawa is also constantly peering over his shoulder at all times to moderate him and make sure he stays in check. And this is pretty degrading to see, as we never get a chance to get back at Sagawa during the game. In every Yakuza game with an antagonist, it usually ends with them punching the life out of each other until someone falls or submits, but with Sagawa, this is not something that ever happens for Majima. It really does drill down the fact that Majima at this current point is only really seen as a slave to the Tojo clan, who is just tasked with filling their pockets. With how things are going, Majima doesn't really have a solid view or plan on where he's gonna go from here, until he meets someone who changes his view completely. Upon meeting a Yakuza named Nishitani, he was almost instantly drawn towards him by his carefree and unchained personality. Nishitani is essentially everything that Majima wishes he could be as a man, unbounded by anything and free to do whatever he wants when he wants. This dynamic of the two would start off as one of the coolest fights of Yakuza 0, leading into a strong bond that the two would eventually form. This wildcard of a character would inspire Majima to become something more of himself and break free from the chains holding him down. No more buttoned up suits, tidy hair, and cabaret managing. That would eventually lead to what is, in my opinion, one of the coolest scenes and long fights of the entire franchise, where Majima, after spending the entire game being the obedient pawn that he's been, finally reaches his breaking point, and he taps into his psychotic nature where he would storm through the Tojo headquarters at night with nothing but a knife and pure rage. Probably one of the most wild and angriest moments in the entire series, and genuinely one of my favorite moments of the franchise, as for the first time we really get to see a side of Majima that's never been seen before. From this point on in the future games, Majima kinda has a sense of direction and is kinda just running rampant doing whatever he wants at this point. Thanks to Nishitani, Majima's entire nature and view of life has been changed for the better. Majima is definitely questionable at some points, but you can see that he genuinely means no harm, and him and Kiryu have a pretty amazing friendship and rivalry together too. The Yakuza series is filled with so many good moments like this, and a lot of great thought-provoking moments too. With every entry, we get new characters, villains, and tragedies, but they all do such a good job at developing these ideas and humanizing our villains. The harsh reality is that a lot of these people were just raised with these ideals and developed these destructive personalities. And sometimes we never really get a clear answer on who's actually in the wrong here. And this is exactly what Kiryu has to go through every time he gets into these bloody and sometimes fatal encounters. After Majima would rejoin the Shimano family, he would soon meet the legend himself, Kiryu Kazuma, and that would be solidified as probably one of my favorite moments ever in video game history.
Yo! Kiryu-chan!